about time we here at Cinefix turn our lens towards genres. This week we're looking at science fiction in hopes that picking out its best might give us a clue as to what exactly it is we see in the stars. These are our picks for the top 10 sci-fi films of all time. Of course, science fiction isn't all laser, snakes, and rocket juice. At its best, we've always thought that sci-fi was a genre of ideas, of speculation, of dreaming about what's next. And as our favorites emerged, we saw that they tended to convalesce around a handful of key thematic conflicts, sorting into categories more philosophically than otherwise. And for our first slot, we're looking at science fiction that examines how humanity might respond in the face of great scarcity. What it might look like to cling to species existence by a relative thread. It's not post-apocalypse, but boy, is it close. Soylent Green and Logan's Run are some of our subgenre defining faves here, but for this first slot, we want to take some time to look at the newer Snowpiercer.
Would you wear a shoe on your head? Of course you wouldn't wear a shoe on your head. A shoe doesn't belong on your head. A shoe belongs on your foot. A hat belongs on your head. I am a hat. You are a shoe. I belong on the head. You belong on the foot. Yes, so it is.
If you can get past some of the thermodynamically invalid science silliness of the core premise, that a hurtling megatrain is somehow the best place to weather a global winter, boy does it open up a beautiful world of stunning and fascinating set pieces, each arranged in a different car down the line. And along the way, it explores some serious questions and genuine moral quandaries. What if prosperity is predicated on suffering? What if the good of all depends on the pain of some? What is the cost of bringing down a broken system? Revealing and questioning those parts of people that respond to limited resources and exposing some of the barbarism on which society can be built. Of course, when things get a little bit worse, we have the science fiction film that examines how humanity responds in the face of its utter destruction. How we as humans and as a species face our own upcoming extinction. Potential and preventable, certain and unavoidable, or nearly come to pass. It gives us a unique opportunity to reflect on how tenuous our relationship with our planet and existence really is. Some of our favorite films in this genre are the likes of Sunshine, Contagion, Andromeda Strain, The Road, and 12 Monkeys. However, we think Alfonso Cuarón really outdid himself with Children of Men.
As the sound of the playgrounds faded, the despair set in. Very odd what happens in a world without children's voices.
Children of Men shows us an incredibly bleak look at the coming apocalypse, with just enough of a dash of hope that we don't all off ourselves on the way out of the theater. And it's a brilliant concept for the end, a worldwide sterility, certain enough to finish our species for good, but protracted enough for us to have time to really stew in the idea of it. It is an incredible window through which to look at how dependent upon future and posterity we really are, and how quickly things might break down in their absence, regressing from nice and polite to brutish and short, with longevity no longer on the table. Of course, if we're talking sci-fi, at some point we're gonna run into aliens. And if we're looking at it from our philosophical perspective, one of our favorite ways to consider alien movies is to look at the human encounter experience. It offers a unique opportunity for us to look at ourselves as a community of humans, a species as a whole. With a new extraterrestrial player in the game, all of a sudden our in-group bickering can be cast aside. Or not. We love Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the original Day the Earth Stood Still, and the lesser-known rad indie Another Earth. However, for our third pick, we've got to get us some Contact.
If you should meet these vegans and were permitted only one question to ask of them, what would it be?
Well, I suppose it would be, how did you do it? How did you evolve? How did you survive this technological adolescence without destroying yourself?
A Robert Zemeckis film based on a story by Carl Sagan himself, Contact is a perennial fan favorite. A potential alien encounter serves as a point of departure for a discussion about what our shared values as a society are and should be, about what it means for there to be something else out there and how we should respond. Perhaps ahead of its time, in a frank and balanced discussion about rectifying the competing worldviews of scientists and the religious, Contact searches for common ground in our shared humanity and seems all the more relevant for it today. Another sort of alien encounter happens not in the initial contact, but in the aftermath of it, where we have to deal with the question, what now? And this immediately invites questions that mirror those we face in society today, with racial, cultural, and political undertones. Probably one of the most allegorical is District 9, neatly mapping apartheid race relations onto human-alien interaction in Johannesburg. But this conflict isn't just reserved for aliens. The question of cohabitance is raised in the science fiction of robots, AI, clones, and even the undead. Blade Runner is another excellent choice here, examining the rights part of human rights. However, for our number 7 pick, we're actually going with Her.
You know, I can feel the fear that you carry around, and I wish there was something I could do to help you let go of it, because if you could, I don't think you'd feel so alone anymore.
In an increasingly fascinating artificial intelligence genre that is taking more and more complex and realistic looks at what thinking and learning and self-improving machines might unleash upon our world and society, Her is brave enough to almost entirely ignore those questions in favor of what it might unleash upon our emotions. Her explores our fragile human limitations not in intelligence, but in codependency and attachment and emotional need. It is a deeply human look at what the future might hold and what innate features of ourselves might hold us back. Not just our inability to calculate pi to the billionth decimal, but in fact those very inner fragilities that make us human. Of course, as much as the hippies would like to insist otherwise, survival as a species isn't all peace and love and Burning Man barter economies where we're all stronger together and good vibes only. Sometimes conflict is inevitable. And as far as science fiction is concerned, another big topic of exploration is not how much we learn to coexist with another species, but how we deal with sub-existing when we find ourselves no longer the dominant life form. And here, we love The Matrix, The Terminator, and Dark City. But for our number 6 pick, we've got to give it to the original Planet of the Apes.
Tell us, why are all apes created equal?
Some apes, it seems, are more equal than others.
Planet of the Apes is science fiction near its boldest and most socially relevant, exploring mankind at the bottom of the totem pole, making a broad, if not deep, foray into the social consequences of it all. And there's an empathy and self-awareness underlying it. It considers our historical role, especially as colonialists and conquistadors, and inverts it, asking us to walk a mile in the shoes of the oppressed, interrogating our own ethics in the process. Does it lose some credibility in the broadness of its strokes? Sure. But it's the start of a conversation, not the end of it. And the twist? Absolutely classic. A lot of science fiction preoccupies itself with exploring future technology, the advantages, the wonder, the possibilities, but also the risks and the danger. And one of the most interesting ways it does this is by examining the intersection of new technology with human nature. It examines our very human foibles and quirks and considers the possibility that our technological growth might outpace our moral growth, exposing deficiencies that may lie latent within. Some of our favorite examples of this kind of cinema come from Gattaca, Minority Report, and A Clockwork Orange. However, for our number 5 pick, we're actually going to go with a Chris Nolan film. And good God, no, not that one. We're talking about The Prestige, which we think is his finest sci-fi film to date.
Nothing is impossible, Mr. Angier. What you want is simply expensive. If I were to build for you this machine, you would be presenting it merely as illusion?
Well, if people actually believed the things I did on stage, they wouldn't clap, they'd scream. I mean, think of sawing a woman in half.
Mr. Angier, have you considered the cost of such a machine?
Price is not an object.
Perhaps not, but have you considered the cost?
The Prestige is not so obviously science fiction, not least of all because it takes place in the past, because it's about magic, and because there's hardly a spaceship to be seen. But there is science. But the problem is that this obsession-driven innovation is completely divorced from an honest and measured evaluation of what the right thing to do might be. Physics surpasses metaphysics. Can we disregard should we? Algiers and Borden embody ceaseless ambition without moral reflection, unleashing greater and greater suffering with the help of David Bowie turned Nikola Tesla, destroying themselves and each other in the process. But personal ambition is not the only form of ambition, and individual moral decay is not the only form of moral decay. Science fiction also has a long history of exploring not just how technological advances might overtake good sense on a personal level, but how that technology might enable the glitches in human nature to reorganize themselves politically in a way that enhances our ability to exploit, suppress, and control. Done excellently in 1984, in Brazil, and back in Godard's Alphaville. However, for our next pick, we're still pretty damn big fans of Metropolis. Set in the far future society of 2026, which is depressingly less than 10 years away, Metropolis was made 100 years prior in 1926, a story about a dystopian society where workers are little more than fleshy machines, and machines look like tinny worker gals, and wealth stratification is far worse than now, which is far worse than then, so yeah, it's pretty bad. One of the strongest and most enduring influences on the genre ever, it is bold and beautiful and thematic and political. Perhaps not perfectly logical or built on the realist of science, but concerned nonetheless with something more important, that left unchecked, human progress at scale will overcome human dignity. On the far other end of the spectrum, from the large-scale political back down to the deeply personal, we want to look at science fiction films that explore how science and technology might alter the very core human experience. What would happen if we could enhance that one deeply unique human feature that is consciousness? This is Limitless, expanding our cognition, or Abre los ojos, extending our experience beyond death, or Total Recall and Videodrome, blurring the line between virtual and reality. Strange Days explores what might happen if we could start sharing memories, but for our number 3 pick, we're going with what might happen if you could start to erase them with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
This is a hoax, right? And this is Clinton. I assure you, no. There's no such thing as this. Look, our files are confidential, Mr. Barish, so I can't show you evidence. Suffice it to say that Miss Kraczynski was not happy, and she wanted to move on. We provide that possibility.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is very soft sci-fi. Life looks very much like it does for us today. No super puppies or clone slaves or laser sex, except a new technology has been developed that can erase memory, marketed to help let go of the pain after a breakup. And much like Her does with artificial intelligence, Eternal Sunshine explores the consequences of this emotionally. But it is not a warning to be careful of erasing our past. Instead, it is an exploration of human nature by relief, revealing that which is deeply human by examining its absence. The result is not so much about the future, but about the present, which is really what all our favorite science fiction films are doing, using an exploration of where we might be to explore where it seems like we're heading in order to reveal exactly where we are. Closing in at number 2, there's another sort of cautionary tale. Not of our future advancements unlocking a part of our collective personalities that turns nasty, but of the future itself unleashing something uncontrollable and unpredictable on the world. We have stumbled down a path from which we cannot easily return. This is most classically Frankenstein, or Gojira, or more recently The Host, or Akira, or Jurassic Park. And for our penultimate pick, it's Stalker.
Что же это было, если не метеорит?
Ну, я же говорю, неизвестно.
Ну, а сами-то вы что думаете?
Да ничего я не думаю. Что угодно. Послание человечеству, как говорит один мой коллега. Или подарок.
Ничего себе подарочек.
Stalker is a simple film. A guide leads 2 men, the writer and the professor, into the Zone, a mysterious and unexplained place that we assume must be a remnant of a nuclear disaster, or an alien visitation, or some kind of wrinkle in space-time. There, they seek a room that is said to grant its entrants their deepest desire. The zone around the room is modern society recaptured by nature, a burnout land returning to its infancy, almost eerily predicting what would become of Chernobyl less than a decade later. And again, we see a science fiction conceit turning us not towards the future, but inside, towards desire and ambition and a search for something greater, guiding us slowly into an exploration of our own inner zone, interrogating what it might unleash upon the world if such an opportunity might arise. And finally, for our top pick, we're also looking at science fiction that puts it all together, unhinges its jaw and attempts to swallow the entirety of the future of humanity in one gulp. And for our pick, you've probably already guessed it. We're not distinguishing ourselves as unique list makers on this one. No, for our top pick, we're shocking all of nobody by going with 2001: A Space Odyssey, because sometimes, if it ain't broke, you really don't need to fix it.
I am putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do.
What might we say about 2001: A Space Odyssey that hasn't been said 1,000 times before? It is vast, inscrutable, beautiful, boring, prophetic, navel-gazing, cold, genius. It sets out to trace the entire history of man from apes through star children and spends 10 minutes on kaleidoscope colors in the process. It is almost impossible to understand on first viewing or without a little help from the book, which may or may not even be canon. But it also inspired and continues to inspire nearly all modern science fiction. In an era where science fiction was a genre for pulpy B-movie fare, Stanley Kubrick revitalized it and proved that it, too, could be art. He flummoxed audience members, enraged critics, and challenged Tarkovsky himself. He struck a frustrating balance between the posing of questions and the absence of answers, inviting generations to consider exactly who we were and where we might go as a part of something greater than ourselves, which is why it's our pick for the best science fiction film of all time. So, what do you think? Disagree with any of our picks? Love any sci-fi films we skipped over? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more Cinefix movie lists.